My name's Jack. I'm probably going to assume you already know that I'm a normal guy. I graduated from college with a degree in marketing and went to work in sales. I love being a salesman, and I make a good living. A year ago, I was promoted to general sales manager at the car dealership. I married Susie, the love of my life, soon after I graduated, and we have a 2-year-old. My son was 6 months old when Susie went back to work. She'd decided that motherhood wasn't for her and had her tubes tied. I was okay with that. It's her body, after all. She works for Jenkins Manufacturing as a secretary. 3 months ago, she was promoted to personal assistant for Paul Jenkins, who's a vice president and the son of the owner. I called my office, and after hearing my story, my boss told me to take all the time I needed. I found out my wife of 5 years was cheating on me. How did I find out? She confessed to me. It was after supper one night. She'd put the baby to bed and told me to sit down at the kitchen table. She said we needed to talk. I want you to know that this is your fault. If you hadn't insisted that I go with you to that convention in Miami last month, it would never have started. But it did, so now you're just going to have to put up with it. I asked, "What do you mean?" "I'm having an affair with Paul," she said. Paul, who used to be Jenkins, but is now Paul, her boss. I tried to stay calm. "How is it my fault?" I asked. "You insisted I go with you. I had to ask Paul for time off. He agreed, but only. If I took a long lunch with him, that means a visit to a local motel and me letting him have intimacy with me. I never told you about him and all the gossip around the company because I didn't want you to get mad and make me quit. I like working there, and jobs are scarce nowadays. He'd taken long lunches with other girls, and they all commented on his manhood. He is huge. Long story short, I went with him, and he is an amazing lover. His size made me climax intensely. I couldn't stop thinking about it even when I was with you in Miami. He touches me in places you never will. After we came back from Miami, I informed you. Lunches with other girls, and they all commented on his manhood. Long story short, I went, and he is an amazing lover. His size made me climax intensely. I couldn't stop thinking about it even when I was with you in Miami. He touches me in places you never will. After we came back from Miami, I informed you. I told him that if he ever wanted to do it again, I was ready. I've been going on long lunches with him a couple of times a week since we've been back. You unfaithful woman! I will not put up with you cheating. You better get an attorney because I'm going to file. I answered calmly. Just listen for a few minutes. First, this thing with Paul will end. He goes with a girl for 5 or 6 months. Then he finds another one. I'll be transferred to another department and get a raise to boot. This isn't interfering with us. I still make love to you anytime you want. It's just a work thing. I think it is more about his size. Secondly, there's no way I'm getting a divorce. This is a no-fault state, so I'll get the house and you'll pay the mortgage. I'll get alimony since you make a lot more than me, and you'll pay child support for the next 20 years. You'll also pay the boys' tuition at a private school. You'll be living in a small rundown apartment and eating at TV diners because you can't afford to go out. Paul will break up with me, and I'll find someone new for intimacy. I might even let the new person move in with me to help with the boy. You'll still see your son every weekend while I go out clubbing for a week at a time. In the summer, I'll be on vacation in Vegas or cruising the Caribbean with one of my lovers. So forget about divorce and just go with the flow. I did forget about divorcing the unfaithful woman, but I didn't go along with it. It was the next week when she walked out of the bathroom naked, as the day she was born, that I saw them. She had 2 hickeys on each breast. She stood in front of me as I sat on the bed. Paul wanted to mark me as his, so I let him. I told him that you knew about us and you are fine with it. I want you to know that we are thinking about inviting you to one of our long lunches. I think it would be fun watching you. I replied, "Don't be so sure. Remember, it's no fault. I can still divorce you, and it'll still end up the same. Don't worry, you're not getting second best." I douched, then sat in a hot bath. I should have. I made sure she was all cleaned out. That night, she told me that Paul and she would be attending a conference in San Diego the following week. She asked me to make arrangements for the boy, saying they would leave on Wednesday morning and be back Sunday night. They would be staying at the Marriott. I was staying at the Marriott San Diego, which is right on the border with Mexico. That gave me an idea. 6 years ago, I'd worked late and was driving home. I saw a car run a red light and crash into the car in front of me. That car flipped over twice before coming to a stop on its top. I jumped out of my car and ran towards the car was on its roof, and the girl in the passenger seat was dead. Her brains were on the pavement. The young guy who had been driving was trapped in the car. His seatbelt was still on and it was jammed shut. I used my pocket knife to cut it off him and was dragging him out when the car exploded. I wasn't burned, but I was knocked to the ground. We both lay in the street until the police and the ambulance arrived. Some bystanders had called and told the police what they had seen. I was checked out and released that night. The next evening, I visited that guy in the hospital. He had a broken arm and 2 broken legs, but otherwise he was fine. In the room with him was his mother, a very pretty Mexican lady. She explained that my son was visiting his girlfriend, who was a student at the university here in town. They were returning from a movie when the accident happened. He is so lucky you were there to pull him out. If he'd been burned, he wouldn't be here now. She wiped a tear from her eye. We chatted for a while, then her son Ricardo went to sleep. She invited me to supper at the cafe in the hospital. There were hardly any people there, so we had a private conversation. She told me she'd blown up when she got word of thee. She asked me to tell her what happened. I said I'd seen the car run a red light and stopped to see if I could help. As I ran past the first car, I saw the driver lying on the hood. He was almost decapitated, so I knew he was dead when I got to her son's car. I saw the girl who was in the passenger seat. I checked the passenger seat and saw that her head was crushed and her brains were everywhere. I used my Swiss Army knife to cut her son out of his seat and pulled him out as the car exploded. She told me that her son's father was in Mexico and that she had told him what had happened. I did wonder why he had not come to the hospital with her. I went to the hospital with her, but I didn't say anything. Maybe they don't get along. It's none of my business anyway. As I was leaving, she handed me a card and said, "Jack, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything at all, call this number and leave a message saying who you are and how I can get in touch with you. I'll give you a call back, okay? Anything at all. His father and I are really grateful for what you did. Rico is our only son." I put the card in my Rolodex at work and never thought of it again until 2 years later, when Mr. Hector Antonio Lopez Z, the name on the card, was killed in a joint operation. With the Mexican police and the United States Drug Enforcement Agency involved, it made the national news. I saw a picture of her too. That's right. He was a bigwig in the Rio Bravo drug cartel. I wondered if that number was still working. I had nothing to lose at this point, so I dialed it. Law Offices of William Judson. "I'd like to speak to Maria Lopez, please." I was put on hold for a few minutes and then a man's voice said, "Maria is busy at the moment. May I ask who's calling?" He said it would be about an hour before she could return my call. 30 minutes later, she called back after we exchanged greetings. I asked about Ricardo and found out that he'd recovered just fine. He'd met another girl a couple of years ago and married her. I'm expecting my first grandbaby in 2 months. I never thought I'd be a grandmother. And it's all thanks to what you did that night. Jack, why are you calling and how can I help you? I told her everything. I'm sure she could hear the tension in my voice when I spoke of my son, Sue, cheating, why I couldn't divorce her, and then wanting to make me a cuckold. I told her I didn't. I'd never told anyone what was going on in my life, not even my brother. But for some reason, I just unburdened myself to her. She never interrupted me, and when I was finished with my sad story, she gave me a minute. Then she spoke. "They'll be in San Diego next Wednesday through Sunday." I told Jack, "They'll be at the Marriott." "Should we get rid of them?" she asked. "I'll take care of it," I replied. There was silence for about 10 seconds. "I understand," I said. The line went dead on Tuesday. Susie was excited. She was busy packing her suitcase all evening, so I spent some time with my son. She finally came to bed and offered, so I accepted. I figured I kissed her goodbye on the cheek the next morning as she literally ran to the Huber that was taking her to the airport. I never saw her again. Sunday came and went, and Susie wasn't home. I was a little nervous, but I think I handled it well. Monday morning, I called her work and asked to speak to her. I was transferred to Mr. Jenkins, Paul's father and my wife's boss. They went to San Diego for a conference, and they were meant to be back last night. "Where are they?" I asked. "I've been trying to contact Paul since he didn't get home last night. He's not answering his cell. Maybe they decided to stay another day or two. Don't worry about your wife. I'm sure she's with him and he'll take care of her. I could hear the smirk in his voice. I'm sure he'll be fine, I replied, hung up the phone and decided to wait a week or so before I looked for a nanny. 3 weeks later, 2 detectives came to my office after introductions. They started what felt like an interrogation. Why haven't you filed a missing person report on your wife? She's not missing. That's why she went to a conference with her boss, Paul Jenkins. I found out that he stayed in the same hotel room at the Marriott in San Diego. I called his father and he told me not to worry. Paul was with her and would take good care of her, so I figured she left me for a rich man. I've been waiting for some process server to show up. I'm stuck with all the bills and caring for our son. Her salary paid the mortgage on the daycare. I'll probably have to sell the house and get an apartment. Did your wife have an insurance policy? I don't know of any. Why do you think she's dead? Paul Jenkins has $1 million dual Keyman policy. His father has hired a private investigator and an attorney to look into having him declared dead so he can collect on it. What do you think? Maybe the bastard killed them both to collect on an insurance policy. The company is in financial trouble and has $1 million. Dollars can solve a lot of problems. I can't believe this. A cheating wife killed with her lover for an insurance policy on him sounds like something you'd see in a TV movie. Please keep me informed of any developments in the case. She may be a cheater, but she is my son's mother. They told me they would advise me of any developments. I followed up with them every month for the next year, but Paul and Susie were never found. The case went cold, so I divorced Susie. 5 years later, I saw in the news that Paul Jenkins was declared legally dead. Jenkins Manufacturing got their $1 million. There are always options, and that's the end of it. If you enjoyed today's story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.